All right, welcome to another episode of Inside the Power Play, a show where we dive into power plays that are being created to support messaging, positioning, and go to market. Today we have Dennis Still from Bigfoot Analytics. Welcome, Dennis.
Hello, thanks, Rob. Great to be here.
Yeah, can you start, Dennis, by just giving us a quick overview of your background and tell us a little bit more about Bigfoot?
2014, I kind of started Bigfoot on the side, so it was kind of a side hustle sort of thing. I had gotten asked by a nonprofit to help do some data analysis, and I felt like I needed to kind of like make it separate from my full time my full time role. And then basically in 2017 went full time and have been doing it ever since. So Bigfoot Analytics is an analytics consulting business that really tries to help people understand and focus on those bigger questions rather than sort of getting wrapped up in the data and the technology and those kind of things. It's more about trying to get to that understanding and the insights that come from that, and really trying to, and my core business tends to be startups, some nonprofits, and sort of smaller businesses. So it's not the Targets and those kind of things, the enterprise businesses of the world. It tends to be a little bit smaller, and that's where I like to work, because I think I get the best opportunity to work with people who are really kind of scratching and clawing, trying to get to growth. So
Yeah, absolutely. Our customer base is very similar, so that definitely
yeah,
resonates with me.
yeah.
So we're talking today about a new offering that you've just launched called the First Footprint. I want to ask a couple questions about that, but I wanted to start by just asking you what gap or frustration has led you to want to start offering this to teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge is that, particularly right now in this sort of economic environment, sort of the up and down that we've been going through, the last 6 months or so, um, particularly, I think the challenge is just trying to make sure that there's an opportunity to answer some questions or try to get some insights at a maybe a little bit lower sort of price point, or entry point for businesses, because I think a lot of times the gap has been, I see the opportunity when I'm talking to somebody, and then when I sort of present that to them, it ends up being, I always talk about analytics not being a sprint, it's more of a marathon, and I think you really have to kind of commit to some time to to not only get the data, but then sort of build the infrastructure and the process within an organization to be able to drive insights. Because sometimes I ask the question, which is, what what are you like, what do you want to be able to do with this information? So if you see a number, right, and it's up or down or whatever on a particular day, because I get a lot of like, oh, I want instant analytics, I want real-time analytics, and it's like, yeah, that's great, but I'm like, can you take an action based on that, right? Like, so if you see a trend in your business, let's say it's like a six day trend where it's like things are trending down. If I say to you, okay, this is why I think it's trending down, can you actually respond? And honestly, I would say somewhere in the 80 to 90% range can't respond instantaneously
Hmm.
to a trend like that. So that's where I try to help them. So that was the kind of the gap that I was looking at, which was, how do I fill this sort of gap of, you know, getting people some insights and maybe helping them really quickly with something versus sort of an extended engagement and those kind of things.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. A follow-up question that I think is a good segue from that one is we've talked about this a lot in our conversations, but a lot of teams are just drowning in dashboards and data and tools. So, what's your take on that challenge that they have, and how is the first footprint, or how is the work with you in general helping them navigate that just messiness that comes with data dashboards?
Yeah, I liken it to a couple of different things. One is, I had a customer I guess about a year or so ago. I posted on LinkedIn about this, that referred to me as the data therapist, which I thought was a really interesting way to sort of approach it, which I had never sort of thought of as a data
Yeah.
professional, was because it's kind of like talking people off the ledge. So what ends up happening is that you get a dashboard, and then somebody else creates another dashboard, and then there's another dashboard and another dashboard. And I've been I've been involved with these things too, where it's like, you think you like, this is the dashboard we need, and then somebody's like, well, no, we needed to do this, and if you can't filter it in the right way and those kind of things, then you build another dashboard. And I've been in environments where there's 300 and some odd dashboards, right? And it's just like, okay, people are drowning in information, and information. What I mean there is like data points, right? So it's like, it's a metric, it's a, and so you'll get these. I show people during like some pitches and stuff like this too. Is like, you get these decks, or you get these dashboards where it's just chart, 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 chart. Like whether it's a table or a visualization or whatever, but there's absolutely no, like, you look at it, there's 50 different things on the screen, and it's like, okay, what am I supposed to do with that? Like, what am I supposed to sort of get at? And so I think trying to get people to sort of step back and sort of say, what's the thing that drives the business, right? Like, and trying to sort of strip back, instead of looking at 50 metrics, maybe it's 5, maybe
Yeah.
it's 2, maybe it's 1, right? It's like, and so it's trying to get people to kind of come back and say, what was the purpose? Like, why were we sort of doing all this stuff? And I joke also about the why in analytics, right? Because the analytics has an actual why in it, but the why part is the WHY, which is like, hey, why are we sort of collecting and sort of doing these things? And I think that's where the real challenge comes in, because I think that's where insights get made and sort of happen, and nuggets. And there was one business where like I sort of found this information. I was like, wow, this is really, I think people believe that you're going to always find gold nuggets all the time. Like, insights are like, I'm working on a story right now, or a sort of an article, if you will, about data fairies, right? Like, so there's this notion of like, just instantly, like, the data person will instantly answer your questions, and we have even more of that with AI and things like that going on right now. So I think the challenge is like trying to come up with a way to say, how do I answer some of these questions and drive some growth, and the incremental growth? Because I think some of these small organizations, that's where it's at, like, that's where you need to be able to sort of like, it's not going from 2 customers to 1,000 customers. It's going from 2 to 10 to 20 to 30. It's like, I mean, and I think that's where people get kind of stuck. And so I hope this offering will kind of help people, kind of get to that. And so, or get to some of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like everyone is overwhelmed right now with their tech stack, whether they're focused on analytics or sales or marketing. And I think the reason why is because it's never been easier to launch tools, right? So we've got more and more tools being created every day. There's FOMO around, are you using, the most recent one? And I think it's overwhelming for leadership teams and for founder CEOs, especially, to somehow have a strong understanding of how these tools work, but also what you're supposed to get out of them. So I'm excited.
You get sold. You get sold these things. So like, if you for example, I was having this conversation with somebody yesterday at a conference where, like, you get Salesforce, right? And then Salesforce, they bought Tableau, and they basically said, well, you can have Tableau for, some ridiculously, smaller rate because you've already paid for Salesforce, right? And then all of a sudden you get something, and then no one knows how to use it. They don't really understand the data behind it. So I think, understanding, it's not just about connecting data sources and then sort of going. It's about connecting data sources, then understanding like what went into that. Because there may have been a tech person 2 technologies ago who went, oh, I'm going to filter out, anyone below a certain, like, maybe it's a zip code, right? Or like, whatever it is, they filter those people out, and you've got a stack of data that's built off of something where somebody made a filter or took something out, 2 years ago, and you don't know it. And so you're building your business off of like, well, this is what all the people are doing. And the reality is, wait, you excluded, an entire zip code, or you excluded, certain kinds of like, and I see this all the time where it's just like, wait, why is this query or this thing doing this count this way? And I was able to find with one client, I increased their number of conversions by like 20% simply by changing the calculation, because they were calculating things. They were doing this sort of rolling 30, and they weren't accounting for people who were converting past that rolling 30. And so it was like this, like, every month they were doing this count, but it wasn't sort of getting the people that were like, oh, they were in that month, but they converted 2 months down the road or 3 months down the road. And so they were missing these counts. And I literally increased them by like 20% for their
Wow.
annual number, So like, and
Yeah,
that
I
was
mean,
just
that's
a
huge.
calculation, right? And just finding
Yeah.
that information. So,
Yeah, it's like how many more of those are just sitting
oh yeah.
there, sitting out there that just aren't
And
being
people get
discovered.
sworn. I mean, like, there's just so much. I mean, I tried saying this yesterday at a conference, and I don't even know what the number is. There's so much data. I wish I had. I should probably look it up and see. But I'm like, there's so much data being generated now about everything, and
Yeah.
some of it you can't even see. Like, you can't really see Apple data. You can't see a lot of there's stuff in Google that you can't. I mean, if somebody goes incognito or whatever, I mean, there's just a lot of data you're not seeing. So I would say sometimes we're seeing, like, on the marketing side or whatever, we're probably seeing about half the data that actually probably is impacting whatever we're doing, right? So yeah, there's just a lot of like those missing pieces that hopefully I can at
Yep.
least poke holes into those things so that somebody who's maybe they're starting out, maybe they're a startup, maybe they're an organization that's relatively small, and we can sort of talk about, like, okay, how should you collect this data, right? And how, like, oh, you've got all these privacy rules and regulations that are coming at you from all different places. How do you manage that from a perspective of making sure that you're collecting the things that you need to, try to drive insights and understanding about customers and potential customers and lost customers and that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You've described the first footprint as a strategic investigation. I wanted to ask you how that differs for people that are familiar with analytics or they've worked with analytics providers before. How does that differ from a typical analytics or reporting engagement? That's the first part of the question. And then, if you can, I know with the first footprint, it's really focused on coming to the table with one specific question in mind. Could you share an example of one question that would help people understand the types of questions that would work well for this engagement?
Yeah, I think the trying to remember the first part of that question. Say the first part of that
Yeah,
question
sorry.
again, Rob.
The first
Sorry,
part
it's okay.
was no, it's okay. Strategic investigation. So how does it differ from like a
Oh,
typical
okay.
analytics engagement?
Yeah, well, I think most analytics engagements are, we're going to sell you a technology or we're going to sell you a software, right? I mean, I think,
Mm,
and I think that's where the difference is. Because somebody asked me yesterday, they said, "Oh, do you have a software?" And I'm like, "No, I don't have a software." I'm like, I'm happy to be tool agnostic and use whatever it is that you're sort of using, whatever stack you're using, whatever data, warehouse, lake, pond, river, whatever it is that you're storing data in. It's really about getting access to those things and then sort of thinking through. And this is where I think the question comes in, which is, what is the question you're trying to drive? What do you need to sort of understand? And so I think there's easier ones, like potentially looking at churn, for example, like the loss of customers. I think that that's something where it's like, if you've got data and you've got good data around, like that you've collected, then we can kind of dig into that relatively quickly, and start looking at like patterns and, has something changed where like somebody, does something that's different over a certain amount of time. You got to have some historical data, but like, they were a customer for a year and then all of a sudden, they stopped using or they stopped engaging with the software or with whatever it is that you're selling and projects, etc. And then I think the other questions are things like, what how are all of um, the marketing things that we're trying to do. So, like, if it's paid advertising or influencer or content generation or SEO or whatever, how are all of those things sort of working? Because I think that we've gotten to a point where we've gotten too sort of micro focused, right? So we got to the
hmm
point where we're like, I mean, marketers, I think marketing and marketers in general got to a point where they're like, I want to know Bob Smith did X, Y, and Z on the website, and then he did this or that at this particular moment in time. And I think with all the sort of privacy things that are coming and all the, like the potential of some of the loss of this kind of data, I think we got to step back and sort of say, we're spending this amount of money for these things, right? So these 4 or 5 sort of things. how do they interact with each other? Like the multi-touch, the I think I remember a sales guy once told me, I think at that point it was like 8 or 9 touches before somebody actually like takes an action. It's probably like 12 or 15 now, right?
Yeah.
It's like you got to hit them
Yeah.
like, all the different time. But then trying to get into like, why is that really important for your business, and understanding like those that are getting to a certain point and then either falling out, so they're not buying whatever the product is, right? So you look at cart fall off and those kind of things, and start like trying to figure that stuff out. So I think question wise, it's really about me understanding part of the process, and it's sort of a 7-day sort of process that we've kind of broken out, and it's meant to be try to be as fast as we can. It'll depend a little bit, I think, on access to data points and whether or not you come with a question that's sort of formulated. But I think part of that conversation, the first part of that, is how do we formulate that question, and then how do we turn that question into a hypothesis that we can test against data, right? That we can use. I've been calling it, the path sort of framework, right? Which is like, it's process, analytical thinking, and then hypothesizing, right? So like this path of like trying to figure out what is the question that will help answer, is it churn? Is it, we've had a lot of, big clients, reduce their, whatever it is they're offering or something like that. And then trying to get to that. So it really is going to depend, I think, on the client. And I think that's the difference in my offering and my ability, is that I've worked in different kinds of data and fields. And, it's really about trying to understand what you're trying to do, and then having that conversation, and then me hopefully being able to apply, my methodology and my experience to that, and trying to get some answers. So.
Yeah, I think that 7-day engagement period is huge. I mean, we've worked together at startups before, and I think it's so easy for questions like that to just go unanswered forever, because the thought of trying to figure out how to answer it, or just the lack of somebody being there to help orchestrate a process to approach solving the problem is huge. So I think that's super important. And at the end of the day, it sounds like to me what you're delivering, at least initially, is clarity and confidence to the leadership team, right? Or the person asking the question. It's like confidence that they can use data to drive insights and action, and then just clarity around, how do we even approach answering this question? How do we approach using the data in a way that's going to help us move forward? So I think that's great.
I mean, I think the what ends up happening is that you end up, when I first started my career, I was like one of the only people in the room that would have a number, right? So a percent or a number or whatever it was. Now everyone has a number, like everyone has a percent, everyone, whatever tool they're using, whatever, like, oh, I'm going into Facebook Insights, or I'm going like, and I think part of it is like, again, I go back to, I once said to somebody, I said, I feel like I'm a BS reader, which is that I try to sort of see that from a data perspective, which is, okay, this person, the marketing leader is saying it's a 50% conversion rate, and the finance guy is saying, no, it's 25%, right? And it's like the ability to kind of take data and sort of figure out like, okay, where is it, right? Maybe it's in between, maybe the 50% is right, maybe the 25%, like trying to understand that. And so hopefully I can come in as sort of a scientific observer, if you will, and basically sort of take the approach of like, I don't have a stake in the game in terms of like who's right or who's wrong. I'm just there to try to sort of get some clarity around that. And you and I have talked about this before. The word truth, right, is like, it's very, scientific truth is very flexible. And so the reality is that it may be truth at this particular point. Case in point, at some point, somebody believed that the world was flat, right? Well, at some point, somebody went, circumnavigated the globe and was like, it's not. So it's like,
yeah, right.
I mean, I think that's, well, sorry. Although I know that there are some people still believe that. Sorry. No offense, Rob, if you're a flat earth guy, but I'm like, the reality is, that's where we kind of come in, which is that we try to kind of get to, the truth. Yesterday we were at a conference, and I joked about somebody who's a statistician said the null hypothesis, right? I mean, I live this every day.
Yeah.
It's like I I use the null hypothesis like it's sort of the existing, like what is the existing, this is my belief, whether it's a CEO's belief. Oh, I think this is what happens when customers come in. And then you basically sort of create the alternative hypothesis, which is, okay, what are we sort of testing here in terms of, do we believe that that's the case or not? And if you don't, then you come up with an alternative hypothesis, and you basically sort of test that with data, and you come to some sort of conclusion. And people do this all the time with technology, like for example, Optimizely and some tools like that. The reality is that using those tools is great, but you also build in sort of errors, right? So if you keep testing the same thing in Optimizely, and you go, oh, A is better than B, okay, I'm gonna take A. Now you test A against C. Okay, now C is better. Okay, I'm going to take C. Like, you continue to add error in that sort of process to the point where you may actually get to a point where you really aren't testing the same sort of question that you originally had. But people
Right.
don't realize it because they're just like, Optimizely sells you, and it's like, I mean, it's a great tool and it has its purposes, but at the same time, it's like, I think having someone sort of who's experienced in that and being able to kind of hopefully guide and then educate, because that's my favorite part of
Mm.
this, is that a lot of times I end up educating the team on how to sort of do some of this stuff. And I mean, I've worked myself out of countless engagements, right? Because that's what
Right.
ends up happening, right? Is that they get better at it and they get sort of like, and then you're like, they don't need you as much anymore. And that's okay. I'm okay with that. So.
Yep. Yeah. All right. One final question for you.
Sure.
For anyone who's watching this and thinking about the first footprint, who is a good fit for it, and how can they get a hold of you if they're interested in going through it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the organizations that are, trying to sort of answer and have sort of those quick answer of like, we're really stuck on something, and the team is really sort of struggling to try to answer that question. Maybe it's a CEO's question or a board member's question or whoever. So I would say, those organizations that are probably a little bit smaller and maybe don't have a data scientist, or don't have or maybe have somebody sort of part time working on it in terms of the digital marketing team or something like that. So I think that smaller sort of organization that has a little bit of resources to be able to engage in something. Like I said, it's not an expensive engagement at this point. So I think trying to get people in the door in terms of like that they understand what I'm trying to do, and sort of show them kind of where it can go. Because I think this is just an initial kind of step of, let's answer this
Yep.
question, let's get an answer, and if that's all you need, then that's we walk away, and that there it is. You can reach me at Dennis at bigfootanalytics.com. That's the email address. It goes directly to me. I try to stay inbox zero. I know some people do not do that, but I do. So I'm really a little anal retentive about that. So, and then I'm on LinkedIn as well, Dennis Still, and you can see my picture and all that sort of stuff under Bigfoot. The website is bigfootanalytics.com, so you can go there too. But it kicks to me if you submit anything or something like that. So.
Perfect. Perfect. Well,
Cool.
thanks, Dennis, for the time. Super excited about the first footprint. Looking forward to seeing you interact with more teams that need to answer that one question that they just can't get around right now.
Yeah, and I really thanks Rob for like you really, Rob was really instrumental and helpful all along the way, working together to sort of get this off the ground, and then just overall in terms of messaging and stuff. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. We'll talk again soon.
Okay, thanks.